The television studio lights glared as conservative media personality Mark Levin reached the crescendo of his nearly 4-minute uninterrupted monologue directed at Representative Jasmine Crockett. What had been scheduled as a substantive policy debate on constitutional powers quickly devolved when Levin abandoned the agreed-upon format to launch into an increasingly personal attack on the freshman congresswoman from Texas. "Let's be absolutely clear about what's happening here," Levin declared with the practiced indignation that had made him a conservative media favorite. "We have a radical leftist congresswoman who clearly hasn't even read the Constitution she swore to defend, lecturing the American people about constitutional principles while advocating policies that would fundamentally transform this republic into something the founders would find unrecognizable." For several minutes, Levin had escalated his rhetoric while the split screen showed Crockett sitting calmly, occasionally taking notes but maintaining composure as the tirade continued. The moderator had made several unsuccessful attempts to redirect the conversation back to the policy discussion before finally giving up as Levin continued unabated. "This is the problem with today's Democratic Party," he continued, pointing his finger at Crockett. "They send these radical progressives who've never studied constitutional history, never read the Federalist Papers, never examined the actual debates of the Constitutional Convention, and expect us to take them seriously when they make absurd claims about executive power that have no basis in our founding documents or legal tradition. It's absolutely outrageous." As viewers began wondering if the entire segment would be consumed by this one-sided attack, Levin shifted to an even more personal critique. "And frankly, I'm tired of being lectured about the Constitution by people who clearly haven't done the basic reading. I've written multiple New York Times bestsellers on constitutional principles. I've studied these issues for decades. I've clerked for an Attorney General of the United States. What exactly are your constitutional credentials, Congresswoman?" The moment the question left his lips, the studio fell silent as the moderator finally managed to interject, "Representative Crockett, you've been very patient. Would you like to respond?" The camera cut to Crockett, who hadn't displayed any visible irritation during Levin's extended monologue. She glanced briefly at her notes, looked directly into the camera, and delivered a response of such devastating precision that it would immediately go viral across social media platforms. "Mr. Levin, I don't need to match credentials with you because, unlike yourself, I don't confuse volume with constitutional validity," she began with remarkable calm. "But since you asked, before entering Congress, I litigated constitutional issues in federal courts for 15 years, including 2 cases before the Supreme Court. I've actually defended the Constitution in courtrooms, not just talked about it on television." As Levin's expression shifted from aggressive confidence to visible discomfort, Crockett continued with surgical precision. "As for your claim that I haven't read the Federalist Papers, I not only read them but taught them for 3 years as an adjunct professor of constitutional law. I'm particularly fond of Federalist 78, where Hamilton explains that courts should overturn legislation inconsistent with the Constitution, establishing judicial review nowhere mentioned in the text itself, demonstrating the founders understood constitutional interpretation would evolve beyond literal text." Without raising her voice, but with unmistakable command of the material, she concluded, "But perhaps most importantly, the Constitution doesn't belong to self-appointed media experts, but to the American people, including those whose ancestors were explicitly excluded from its original protections, yet still fought to perfect this union through the Reconstruction Amendments that fundamentally transformed the document you claim I don't understand. So, rather than questioning my credentials or constitutional knowledge, perhaps we could return to discussing the actual policy question we were invited here to debate. Unless performative outrage is the only constitutional argument you've prepared today." The studio fell completely silent as Levin, for perhaps the first time in his media career, appeared momentarily at a loss for words. The exchange would become what media analysts later described as a masterclass in maintaining substantive focus while neutralizing personal attacks, demonstrating how thorough preparation and strategic restraint allowed Crockett to deliver a response of such comprehensive precision that it completely reversed the dynamic of what had seemed an overwhelmingly one-sided encounter. Before we dive deeper into this explosive confrontation that has everyone talking, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of the most revealing moments in political debates that mainstream media often glosses over. Now, let's get back to the remarkable exchange where Representative Jasmine Crockett's strategic patience and precise response completely transformed what had been a one-sided attack into a defining moment that left even a seasoned media personality like Mark Levin momentarily speechless. Jasmine Crockett's path to that pivotal moment on national television reflected an unconventional trajectory in American politics. Elected to Congress in 2022, after serving just one term in the Texas state legislature, the 41-year-old attorney had quickly established herself as one of the most effective communicators in Washington despite her junior status. What political commentators often missed when focusing on her relatively recent arrival on the national scene was her extensive background in constitutional litigation long before entering politics. Before running for office, Crockett had built a reputation as a meticulous legal advocate, particularly skilled at maintaining strategic discipline in heated courtroom situations. Recognizing that emotional reactions often undermined substantive arguments, while strategic patience created opportunities for devastating counterarguments at precisely the right moment. Her approach to confrontation had always emphasized comprehensive preparation rather than reactive engagement, understanding that thorough command of subject matter created opportunities for precise responses that could completely reframe discussions that opponents believed they were dominating. Though new to televised confrontations with established media personalities, she approached these encounters with the same strategic discipline that had served her well in courtroom settings, where emotional restraint and precise timing typically proved more effective than matching aggression or interruption in establishing command of difficult discussions. Mark Levin, by contrast, had established himself over decades in conservative media as one of the most forceful and confrontational voices in political commentary. Following a career that included serving as chief of staff to Attorney General Edwin Meese during the Reagan administration, Levin had built a media empire through radio, television, and best-selling books that positioned him as an authoritative voice on constitutional issues from a conservative perspective. His rhetorical style typically combined historical references with passionate denunciation of political opponents, an approach that had proven especially effective in media formats where emotional intensity and uninterrupted monologues often dominated more measured exchanges. Levin's effectiveness comes from his ability to overwhelm opponents through sheer verbal intensity, one media analyst had observed privately. By maintaining an unrelenting pace and emotional fervor while positioning himself as the authoritative voice on constitutional principles, he creates an environment where substantive response becomes difficult. Opponents typically either match his emotional tone and lose focus on substance, or appear overwhelmed by his rhetorical dominance. This approach has proven particularly effective in segments with limited time, where his ability to consume available airtime often leaves opponents with insufficient opportunity to develop substantive responses regardless of their actual knowledge or expertise. The television segment that brought them into this extraordinary exchange had been promoted as a substantive debate on constitutional limits to executive power, a topic of significant interest given ongoing controversies about presidential authority in various policy domains. The format had been structured to allow each participant equal time for opening statements followed by moderated discussion of specific constitutional questions, with the goal of providing viewers thoughtful analysis from different perspectives rather than typical partisan talking points. When Levin's turn came following Crockett's opening statement, however, he immediately abandoned the agreed-upon format to launch into what became an extended monologue that shifted from policy disagreement to increasingly personal criticism. His approach followed his typical pattern of establishing dominance through rhetorical intensity and credential citing rather than engaging the substantive constitutional questions that were supposed to be the segment's focus. Let's be absolutely clear about what's happening here. He had begun with practiced indignation. We have a radical leftist congresswoman who clearly hasn't even read the Constitution she swore to defend, lecturing the American people about constitutional principles while advocating policies that would fundamentally transform this republic into something the founders would find unrecognizable. This opening framing, characterizing Crockett as a radical leftist who clearly hasn't even read the Constitution, rather than engaging her actual arguments, established a pattern of personal attack rather than substantive engagement that would continue throughout his extended monologue. By suggesting she lacked basic constitutional knowledge rather than offering counter-arguments to her specific points, Levin had attempted to delegitimize her participation in the discussion, rather than engaging the constitutional questions that were supposed to be the segment's focus. This is the problem with today's Democratic Party, he had continued with increasing intensity. They send these radical progressives who've never studied constitutional history, never read the Federalist Papers, never examined the actual debates of the Constitutional Convention, and expect us to take them seriously when they make absurd claims about executive power that have no basis in our founding documents or legal tradition. It's absolutely outrageous. The escalating characterization, now suggesting Crockett had never studied constitutional history or read the Federalist Papers without any evidence for these claims, further personalized what was supposed to be a policy discussion. By making specific assertions about her supposed lack of constitutional knowledge rather than addressing her actual arguments, Levin had shifted the discussion from substantive disagreement to personal attack in ways that would make his eventual question about her credentials particularly vulnerable to correction. Throughout this extended monologue, the split screen showed Crockett sitting calmly, occasionally taking notes but maintaining remarkable composure despite the increasingly personal nature of Levin's comments. This strategic patience, resisting the natural impulse to interrupt or display visible anger, reflected her courtroom experience where emotional restraint often created opportunities for more effective responses than reactive engagement regardless of provocation. The most strategically significant moment came when Levin shifted from general denunciation to explicit credential comparison and direct questioning. And frankly, I'm tired of being lectured about the Constitution by people who clearly haven't done the basic reading. I've written multiple New York Times bestsellers on constitutional principles. I've studied these issues for decades. I've clerked for an Attorney General of the United States. What exactly are your constitutional credentials, Congresswoman? This direct question, following explicit citation of his own credentials while suggesting she lacked comparable qualifications, created the perfect opening for Crockett's devastating response. By specifically questioning her constitutional knowledge and credentials, after making unsupported assertions about her supposed lack of basic constitutional understanding, Levin had inadvertently created the opportunity for a factual correction that would completely undermine the premise of his extended attack. When finally given the opportunity to respond after nearly 4 minutes of uninterrupted criticism, Crockett's approach immediately signaled a different strategy than matching Levin's emotional intensity or responding with similar personal attacks. Her calm demeanor and measured tone created immediate contrast with Levin's aggressive style, while her opening statement directly addressed the credential challenge he had raised while immediately reframing the discussion. Mr. Levin, I don't need to match credentials with you because, unlike yourself, I don't confuse volume with constitutional validity. She began with remarkable calm that contrasted sharply with his previous emotional intensity. This opening line, acknowledging his credential challenge while immediately reframing the discussion from credential comparison to substantive validity, established both her unwillingness to be drawn into personal competition and her focus on constitutional substance rather than rhetorical dominance. The statement that she didn't confuse volume with constitutional validity served multiple purposes simultaneously, subtly highlighting his reliance on rhetorical intensity rather than substantive argument, while positioning constitutional analysis as a matter of logical validity, rather than emotional fervor or credential citing. This reframing, from who has more impressive credentials to what constitutes valid constitutional analysis, immediately shifted the conceptual landscape of the exchange in ways that favored substantive engagement over personal attack. Having established this conceptual reframing, Crockett then proceeded to directly address the specific claims Levin had made about her supposed lack of constitutional knowledge, not defensively, but with factual precision that completely contradicted his unsupported assertions. But since you asked, before entering Congress, I litigated constitutional issues in federal courts for 15 years, including 2 cases before the Supreme Court. I've actually defended the Constitution in courtrooms, not just talked about it on television. This factual correction establishing not just theoretical knowledge but extensive practical experience litigating constitutional issues in federal courts, directly contradicted Levin's characterization of her as lacking constitutional understanding. The specific reference to Supreme Court experience created immediate credibility regarding her constitutional expertise, while the contrast between courtroom practice and television commentary subtly highlighted the difference between defending constitutional principles in adversarial legal settings versus discussing them in media formats without direct challenge. As Levin's expression shifted from aggressive confidence to visible discomfort at this unexpected revelation of her extensive constitutional litigation experience, Crockett continued to address his specific claims about her supposed lack of familiarity with founding documents. As for your claim that I haven't read the Federalist Papers, I not only read them but taught them for 3 years as an adjunct professor of constitutional law. I'm particularly fond of Federalist 78, where Hamilton explains that courts should overturn legislation inconsistent with the Constitution, establishing judicial review nowhere mentioned in the text itself, demonstrating the founders understood constitutional interpretation would evolve beyond literal text. This additional factual correction, not only contradicting his claim about her familiarity with the Federalist Papers, but establishing that she had taught them at the university level, further dismantled Levin's characterization, while demonstrating sophisticated understanding of founding-era constitutional thinking. By specifically citing Federalist 78 and explaining its significance for understanding the founders' view of constitutional interpretation, Crockett had demonstrated both specific knowledge of the documents Levin claimed she hadn't read and thoughtful understanding of their implications for constitutional development beyond literal textualism. Without raising her voice, but with unmistakable command of the material, she then moved from factual correction to substantive reframing of constitutional understanding itself. But perhaps most importantly, the Constitution doesn't belong to self-appointed media experts, but to the American people, including those whose ancestors were explicitly excluded from its original protections yet still fought to perfect this union through the Reconstruction Amendments that fundamentally transformed the document you claim I don't understand. This conceptual reframing, shifting from credential comparison to the fundamental question of constitutional ownership and development, elevated the discussion beyond personal disagreement to substantive constitutional understanding. By highlighting the Reconstruction Amendments as fundamental transformations of the original document, Crockett had challenged the implicit premise that constitutional fidelity required adherence to 1789 understandings rather than recognition of how subsequent amendments had deliberately altered the Constitution's fundamental character and protections. She concluded with a strategic redirect back to the policy discussion that was supposed to be the segment's focus. So, rather than questioning my credentials or constitutional knowledge, perhaps we could return to discussing the actual policy question we were invited here to debate. Unless performative outrage is the only constitutional argument you've prepared today. This final statement, contrasting substantive policy discussion with performative outrage while suggesting he might lack actual constitutional arguments beyond emotional display, completed her comprehensive response to Levin's extended attack. By explicitly suggesting a return to the policy discussion while implying his reliance on emotional intensity might reflect lack of substantive arguments, Crockett had both addressed his personal attacks and redirected toward the discussion's original purpose in ways that made continued personal criticism rather than policy engagement appear as avoidance of substantive debate. The studio fell completely silent as Levin, for perhaps the first time in his media career, appeared momentarily at a loss for words. The complete reversal, from his confident dominance of the discussion through extended monologue to being rendered momentarily speechless by Crockett's comprehensive response, created what media analysts would later describe as a masterclass in maintaining substantive focus while neutralizing personal attacks. Her strategic patience in allowing his extended criticism without interruption or visible anger, followed by a response that combined factual correction, substantive reframing, and strategic redirection, had completely transformed what had seemed an overwhelmingly one-sided encounter. "Representative Crockett," the moderator finally interjected after several seconds of awkward silence, "you mentioned the policy question we were supposed to be discussing. Perhaps you could elaborate on your view of constitutional limits on executive power in this specific context? I'd be happy to, Crockett responded with evident relief at returning to substantive discussion. The Constitution creates a framework where executive authority exists within a system of checks and balances rather than absolute domains of unreviewable power. Article 2's Take Care Clause requires faithful execution of laws Congress enacts, while providing discretion in implementation that necessarily involves policy judgment. The constitutional question isn't whether executives can make implementation decisions, they must, but whether those decisions remain within statutory boundaries Congress established and continue serving the purposes those laws were enacted to advance. The ease with which she pivoted to detailed constitutional analysis, citing specific provisions and explaining their implications without notes or preparation time, further demonstrated the depth of constitutional understanding that Levin had questioned during his extended attack. Rather than appearing flustered by the previous confrontation or requiring time to collect her thoughts, Crockett immediately provided sophisticated constitutional analysis that reflected both theoretical understanding and practical experience with constitutional interpretation in real-world contexts. For the remainder of the segment, a noticeable shift in dynamic occurred. While Levin returned to constitutional discussion, his demeanor appeared markedly different, less domineering and more focused on substantive arguments rather than personal attacks or emotional intensity. Most notably, he made no further claims about Crockett's constitutional knowledge or qualifications, instead engaging directly with her policy positions without questioning her basic understanding or expertise. "What we witnessed wasn't just quick thinking," said one media training expert afterward. "It was the result of extraordinary preparation combined with strategic discipline." Representative Crockett clearly recognized that responding emotionally to personal attacks or interrupting would have reinforced the dynamic Levin was trying to establish, while strategic patience created the opportunity for a comprehensive response that completely reframed the discussion. By waiting for the right moment and then delivering a response that combined factual correction, substantive reframing, and strategic redirection, she transformed what appeared to be a completely dominated exchange into a defining demonstration of how substantive command can overcome rhetorical aggression when deployed with strategic precision. By evening, clips of the exchange had gone viral across social and traditional media platforms. Crockett's perfect response silences Levin began trending on multiple platforms, with communication experts and ordinary viewers alike noting the extraordinary effectiveness of her strategic patience, followed by comprehensive response rather than matching emotional intensity or interrupting his extended monologue. This moment reveals something profound about effective communication in contentious settings, observed one political communication researcher. The natural response when subjected to extended personal criticism is either defensive justification or matching aggression, both of which typically reinforce the emotional framing the aggressor has established. What made Crockett's approach so remarkable was her strategic patience in allowing the attack to fully develop without interruption or visible anger, followed by a response that systematically addressed factual claims while reframing the conceptual landscape from credential competition to substantive understanding. That approach doesn't just win the immediate exchange, it transforms the entire discussion by replacing emotional dominance with substantive focus in ways that reveal the difference between rhetorical aggression and actual command of complex material. For communication strategists, the exchange highlighted the crucial importance of strategic timing and comprehensive preparation in confrontational settings. What made this moment so revealing wasn't just the response itself, explained one political communication coach, but how Crockett's strategic patience created the perfect context for its effectiveness. By allowing Levin's attack to fully develop without interruption, she created space for a response that addressed his complete argument rather than individual components, while demonstrating composed confidence that contrasted sharply with his emotional intensity. Most importantly, by waiting until he explicitly questioned her credentials and knowledge, she created the perfect opening for factual corrections that completely undermined his fundamental premise, rather than engaging in point-by-point responses that would have maintained his emotional framing. That strategic discipline, knowing exactly when to respond rather than reacting immediately, proved essential to completely reframing a discussion he appeared to be dominating. In the days following the exchange, several media outlets published analyses examining the effectiveness of different communication strategies in confrontational settings. Most noted that Crockett's approach, strategic patience followed by comprehensive response that combined factual correction, substantive reframing, and strategic redirection, had proven remarkably effective not just in neutralizing personal attacks, but in transforming the entire discussion from emotional dominance to substantive engagement. Particularly significant was how Crockett had used Levin's own argumentative approach against him, waiting until he had fully committed to specific claims about her constitutional knowledge before revealing her extensive litigation experience and academic teaching of the very documents he claimed she hadn't read. This strategic timing had made his factual errors impossible to retract or qualify, creating a dramatic reversal that wouldn't have been possible had she interrupted earlier or responded defensively to his general criticisms, rather than waiting for specific claims she could definitively refute. The exchange demonstrated what media trainers have long emphasized but politicians rarely execute effectively, noted one veteran political consultant. Strategic patience combined with comprehensive preparation creates opportunities that reactive engagement never allows. By waiting for the perfect moment rather than responding immediately to provocation, Crockett created the context for a response of such devastating comprehensiveness that it completely reversed the dynamic Levin had established through extended monologue. Her approach showed that effective communication isn't just about having the right response, but delivering it at precisely the right moment in ways that transform the entire discussion, rather than simply continuing patterns the aggressor has established. For Representative Crockett, the television segment reinforced her growing reputation as one of the most effective communicators in Congress, despite her junior status. What made her approach particularly powerful was that it wasn't based on matching aggression or emotional display, but on strategic discipline and substantive command, qualities that demonstrated genuine communication effectiveness rather than merely performative confrontation. Yesterday's discussion highlighted both the challenges of maintaining substantive focus in confrontational settings and the effectiveness of strategic patience in neutralizing personal attacks, Crockett said in a brief statement afterward. Thoughtful constitutional discussion requires engaging complex questions about governmental structure and authority rather than personal accusations or emotional displays. I remain committed to substantive engagement with difficult constitutional questions regardless of the rhetorical approaches others might employ, believing that careful analysis ultimately serves the public interest better than performative confrontation, regardless of its momentary emotional appeal. The impact of the exchange extended beyond the immediate viral moment to broader discussions about effective communication in politically polarized contexts. Several universities incorporated video of the exchange into their political communication courses as a case study in strategic timing and comprehensive response to personal attacks, while public speaking organizations highlighted the segment as demonstrating how maintaining emotional discipline while waiting for the perfect response opportunity could prove more effective than matching aggression or interrupting prolonged criticism. What Representative Crockett demonstrated goes beyond any single exchange or controversy, noted one communication expert. She showed how strategic patience combined with comprehensive preparation can completely transform confrontational dynamics that appear hopelessly one-sided. By allowing criticism to fully develop without interruption or emotional reaction, then delivering a response that systematically addresses factual claims while reframing the conceptual landscape, she created a model for effective engagement that doesn't require matching aggression or abandoning substantive focus. That approach doesn't just win individual exchanges, it potentially elevates public discourse by demonstrating that calm precision ultimately proves more effective than emotional intensity in establishing genuine command of complex issues. The story of Jasmine Crockett ending Mark Levin's rant with one savage response serves as a powerful reminder of how strategic patience and comprehensive preparation can transform confrontational communication. It showed that sometimes the most effective response to extended criticism isn't interruption or matching emotional intensity, but allowing the attack to fully develop before delivering a comprehensive response that combines factual correction, substantive reframing, and strategic redirection. And in so doing, completely transforming what appeared to be overwhelming rhetorical dominance into a demonstration of the difference between emotional aggression and genuine command of complex subject matter. If you found this breakdown of one of the most effective responses to personal criticism in recent political media informative, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our in-depth analysis of revealing communication moments that demonstrate how strategic discipline and substantive command can overcome even the most aggressive rhetorical attacks. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on effective communication strategies and the importance of strategic timing when responding to criticism in contentious settings.